Hello everybody and welcome to this new video tutorial about the free and open source software Krita. Krita is a very powerful tool that enables you to create 2D digital work. You can do concept art, you can draw, you can even create animations if you want with Krita. So the goal of this tutorial is to give you a very complete overview of the software. So you can be a beginner with this software and even in digital painting, and I'm going to give you I think enough informations and tools and techniques so you'll be able to do your own artworks after watching this video with, of course, a lot of dedication and patience. The topics that we're going to cover are the basic UI of Krita. We're going to discover a lot of tools, a lot of panels. Basically, I'm going to share with you like 99% of the tools that I'm using in this software. Lasso, the different brushes, the layer system. We're gonna see like few hidden features that are quite nice. And then after learning all those technical features, we're going to dive into a more artistic section where I'm going to share with you the basics of drawing, where we're going to discuss line, shapes, volumes, how to control curves and things like that. And then it will be the right time, I think, to dive into painting, where we're going to learn about values and how to paint in grayscale, how to paint light, how to paint shadow. And then we are going to see how Krita can be useful in order to convert a grayscale painting to colors. And after all this, I would say theory, applied theory section, we're going to dive into a demo where I'm going to share with you a portrait painting. It will be a time-lapse, but I will comment everything, and I will be giving you a lot of tips and tricks, at least I hope. And then, as a bonus section, I'm going to share with you the basics of animating in Krita. So I hope you will enjoy the adventure. Before continuing, let me apologize for my French accent. I hope you will understand everything that I'm saying. And in advance, I'm sorry for sometimes I'm finding my words. So I hope everything will be clear enough for you to get the most of this tutorial. Have fun and let's get started. So in order to use Krita, you need to download it on the Krita website. So you can go on krita.org and you can simply click on the Get Krita Now, and then you're going to install the software. It's pretty easy, so I won't go over those simple steps. So I'm using a graphic tablet in order to paint and to be more efficient than with a mouse. And I highly encourage you to get one. I'm using a Cintiq 16 HD Pro. But feel free to use any tablet that are on the market that are, I would say, good enough, because I think it's always good to have good material and to invest in good material rather than having to struggle against bad hardware. So if you're pretty serious about digital painting or digital creation, I will highly encourage you to get a pretty decent material. Now that you've installed Krita, let's open it. So it looks like this, or maybe slightly different for your version, but don't worry, I'm going to explain how to arrange the different panels in the UI. But the first thing you can do is right away click on the new file setup there. As you can see, you're prompted with Create New Document panel, and here you can set up a lot of default things. We are going to set up a document, so in order to do that you can go with the predefined ones. So let's go with, for instance, A4 with 300 ppi, and then you can see that you have two small buttons there that are for swapping those two values, basically that are the width and height of your document. So we're going to go with a horizontal one for this one, and I'm going to simply create this document by pressing this button. As you can see, Krita will create this page, and the first thing that you will want to know in Krita is how to navigate around the UI. So as you can see, you have different panels in Krita that are docked together sometimes, and sometimes that are not docked together. Those panels are called dockers in Krita. So you can go in, for instance, settings there, and you can go with dockers, and you can see a lot of different panels. Okay, so let me, for instance, prompt the palette one, and you can see that now my Docker is there, and if I double click, you can see that I can uncore the, I can dedock, like undock, sorry, the panel, and I can close it, of course. So double click on the name just below, and you can undock and redock. Okay, so I'm going to also, as you can see, if I dock a panel on top of another, you can see that they are going to be aligned horizontally with different tabs, so that's also sometimes more efficient. So this is like how to navigate, not how to navigate, we have a lot of stuff to cover, of course, but this is how to move, I will say, different panels. But you can also see on the side that you have like main toolbars, main, I will say, locations in Krita where you can dock things. So for instance, the toolbar here, I can like put it there. Same with the top bar there. You can see it's a small thing that I can drop there. And usually when you have like dots like this right under my cursor there, you can see that this is like a call to action to drag and drop it, basically. So you can see that here, basically we have the horizontal main toolbar. Here we have like the tools that are available in Krita, and on the side usually it's the user panels where you can find the different layers, where you can find the tool options. We're going to come back on this later, and you have the brush presets too. So lots of cool stuff over there. So before continuing, I want to right away show you different shortcuts that I'm using in Krita in order to make my life easier. So probably the first thing you will do when you open a 2D digital software is to start drawing. So you can see that here we have different tools. We have like squares, circles, lines, and the brush that we're going to use a lot in Krita. And we're going to cover it more in detail later, because this is quite important. This is probably the most important tool in this software. So we're going to pick a black color, so you just simply drag and drop in the square down to the bottom there in the color. Again, if you don't have the advanced color selector, you can go in setting, dockers, and you can like pick this one, and you will have the advanced color selector. And we are going to draw something, so nothing quite ambitious, but just a few strokes. And you can see that with your tablet, with your graphic tablet, that it responds already to the pressure sensitivity of your stylus, which is like expected, of course, for a 2D software. So in order to undo things, you can simply press Ctrl-Z, like in any software, and that's pretty cool. And if you want to redo, you can press Ctrl-Shift-Z, and you're going to redo. I really advise to use the shortcuts and not the menu there, which is like unpractical, of course. So Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Shift-Z are your best friends. So in order to move the canvas, you can press the space bar, and you can see that you have a hand icon that will allows you to grab the canvas and move it. If you want to zoom, you can press Ctrl and space bar, and you just have to slide your stylus. I think this is like pretty neat in terms of navigation. And if you want to rotate around your canvas, you can press Shift and Space. And you can see that here I'm simply rotating my canvas. And if you press the 5 key on your numpad, you're able to restore the rotation of your canvas. Okay, so that's a pretty cool way to navigate in the software, pretty easy to remember, and very aligned with the way a graphic tablet works. Okay, I really would advise to navigate around a bit and like be familiar with those way of moving your canvas. Another window that you can open that's quite useful sometimes is called the navigation, or the overview, sorry. It's like the equivalent of the navigation panel in other software, but you can open the overview panel like this. And as you can see with the overview panel, so double click in order to dedock it, undock it, you can see that it's basically it's a small presentation of your canvas. You can see that you can zoom there. Okay, you can also move the square in order to navigate, and you can rotate it over there like that. and you have this button that enables you to mirror the viewport, like the canvas, sorry. But honestly, I'm only using the overview window in order to have a small reference of my full picture when working, especially when doing like digital painting. So it's a good way for, like, let's say that I'm working a lot, like zoomed in, for instance, and like I want to have a big picture of my work. I can have my navigation over there, okay? And the mirror button, I've mapped it to a shortcut, and I will give you this shortcut soon. Okay, so let's press 5, and honestly, let's undock and remove the overview window. If I want to clear what I have on my current layer, we are going to cover layers soon, but if I want to clear everything, I can press the delete key on my keyboard and it removes the content of the current layer, okay? So a cool shortcut to know also to be free of all this UI is the tab key. So if we press tab, you can see that you only have your canvas and your brush, okay? And this is cool, and you can do a lot of things in this view without having the full user interface. And I really encourage you that when you get familiar with the different shortcuts, you simply stay a lot in this view, because you are going to be less overwhelmed with all the shortcuts. And believe me, you can do a lot of things in this view. We're going to cover more shortcuts soon. Okay, so again, we are going to I'm going to show you the shortcuts that I've set up for the mirror. I've set up H, okay, and this is a good time, I think, to show you where you can set up the shortcuts in Krita. So you can go in the settings option, and you can go with configure Krita over there, and here you have keyboard shortcuts, as you can see. So if you look in this toolbar, it should be written search for you, because my Krita is like some part of my Krita, I don't know why, are in French, but whatever. And if you type mirror, here you're gonna filter the different options that you have in this tool. And as you can see here in the view, the category, I have set up the H shortcut. So in order to set up a shortcut, you simply have to click there, and for the custom one, you just press this box and you press the key that you want to set up, and that's it, and you press OK. And then, as you can see, I can turn on or off the mirror of my view. So this is a pretty neat shortcut. So other tools, that we're going to discover are, and with their associated shortcuts, hard to say for a French guy, are the selection tools. So the selection tools are pretty important in digital software. So they are located there in the toolbox, in the toolbar. Again, if you don't have the toolbar, you probably should have it. So I think that you're gonna see it in this Docker. So in the settings, Dockers, there you have to have this checkbox of toolbox checked. Okay. So the selection tools are over there. So there are many selection tools, but the most common one is the lasso tool, which is called in Krita the freehand selection tool, as you can see. So I can now select, and as you can see, I have small dots that are small flow lines that are representing my selection. So just before continuing explaining this tool, I'm just going to go in the settings, configure Krita, and show you the shortcuts that I've set up for that. So you type freehand selection tool, and as you can see, I've selected the S key. Usually in Photoshop or other software, it's set up as the L key, but it's too far away for my left hand to go on the keyboard, so I prefer to put simply the S key. Okay. And while we are there, there is another really cool shortcut that I want you to set up, because this is the default one, and in Krita it's not default. I don't know why. I think in Krita it's Control-Alt-A, a shortcut that nobody would use this kind of shortcut, to be honest with you, or Control-Shift-A, I don't recall. But it's the deselection one. So when you want to deselect something, usually in any software, in any 2D software, you press Control-D. Okay, don't ask me why. Blender it's A, more logical, but A is for the things in 2D software. So Control D. So I'm going to simply press this, and automatically it's going to filter everything that starts like this. And you can see that here I've set up Control D in order to deselect. And by default, it should be like Control Shift A or something like that. So now, like I can press Control D to deselect, and I can, for instance, let's say I'm in a brush mode by pressing B, and B is the default shortcut, so you won't have to change it. If I press S, you can see that I have my lasso tool. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And Control D to deselect. Okay, feel free to set up this one instead of clicking on the button. So now you have like the box selection, pretty cool. You have the circle selection, pretty cool too. The polygonal one, so you can see it snaps at the end there just to make a perfect polygon, closed polygon. Here you have like the contiguous selection tool. So basically it's the magic one. So as you can see, it helps me to pick different part of my drawing in a smart way. I would say it will try to fill the selection. And in order to add to your selection, whatever the tool that you are using, you can press the Shift key, and you can see that your cursor is going to have a small plus in the icon, and this enables you to add to your selection. Okay, so that's cool because now I can create pretty nice zones where I can like fill them with like big brush strokes. Sorry. So this is cool. And now let's say that I want to remove to my selection. I can press the Alt key. So here you can see how I can remove from my selection. And if I pick my brush tool and paint, you can see how it fills the thing. Okay. So another very, very cool selection method that I never seen like elsewhere or in another software is this one. This one is pretty cool because it's called the magnetic selection tool. And as you will see, it helps me to select things based on what Krita sees as a shape. So I can basically just guide Krita and not be precise in my selection. And as you can see, Krita will try to magnetically pick this selection. I can press Enter, and as you can see, it selects like based on like a magnetic way of like following the shapes. So that's pretty cool, as you can see, and it's often very useful in, for instance, digital painting when you work on only one or few layers and you want to select, for instance, the shape of the nose or the eye or the pupil. You can get pretty accurate with this tool. So honestly, apart this last one that I'm gonna show you, I don't use this one, which is like the Bezier curve selection. Probably can be useful, but as you can see, it creates just a Bezier curve, and you can like drag, you release, you create a Bezier curve, so basically like a curve. You pick, you can create like polygonal by simply tapping around, but if you stay and you release, you create like a curve. But this one, honestly, I never use it. But the last one I'm gonna show you, because I'm using it sometimes, but for that I will have to put different colors on my canvas. It's the most beautiful piece of art that you've ever seen. I know you're impressed. But the idea of this one is like to pick a color. So I'm picking a color, and it's going to try to select based on the color on my layer. So you can see that in this case it has removed the vast majority of red because I've deleted like my selection. But this is pretty cool in a lot of situations. So keep that in your mind. Like this tool, this selection tool is quite nice. It's quite neat. So now it's a good time, I think, to show you one panel in Krita that is absolutely important for you to know about. It's the tool option. So each time you select a tool in Krita, you have options over there in the tool options. So I'm going to double click on the name just to undock it. And again, at this point you should be already familiar with panels. So in case you don't have this panel, settings, Docker, tools, options. Okay, settings, Docker, tools, option. So as you can see here, for the selection tool, each time I'm changing my tools, even like the patch, the drop, the brush, the whatever I'm using, you can see I have a bunch of options, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's go with the similar color selection tool. You can see that by default I'm picking this color, but if I want, I have like a fuzziness option. So if I increase the fuzziness, you can see it picks much more color, and we don't have like this red band over there. Okay, so this is basically a threshold, if you want. Like, it's how much it's going to go toward this color. So for the purple, for instance, you can see it's also picking the blue, because the blue and the purple, they are in the same range, as you can see on the color wheel. Okay, so you can also say, I want to pick the color for all layers. So imagine that you had many different layers and you want to select a color, but for every layer, you can also do that there. So a lot of options over there that are pretty cool. And for like the selection, you can see that you also have some options. So for instance, with the freehand, you can see that you can say by default, you just replace. So each time I'm doing a selection, it's going to replace the selection. But here you have like by default intersect, meaning that it's going to intersect with my selection, meaning that, like, let's say that I have this and I want to do a shape like this. You can see it's going to remove the other edges. This one is, as you can see, you can hover any option in Krita and it's going to say what's the meaning of what's under your mouse. So in this case, it's add by default. So I don't have to press shift. Okay, I can just expand my selections like that. So pretty cool. Here it's subtraction. Okay, so I can design shapes like this. And here it's the symmetric difference, which I never used, to be honest with you. So yes, lots of tool options in your in this settings. Usually I'm docking this over there, but below the brushes usually. But feel free to organize your space the way you want, and we're going to come back on that later on. Okay, so now a neat tool that you usually use along with the selection is the transform tool. So in order to transform a selection, you just press Ctrl T, and this is a pretty standard default way of a pretty standard default like shortcut. Sorry. And now you can see that you have this sort of gizmos, this sort of like tool that enables you to move when you have the the directional cross icon under your mouse. So I can move my selection over there. The squares there are for scaling. So you can see that I can pick one edge and it's going to scale in that direction, in the direction of the square. And if I press the Alt key, it's going to scale in both directions, okay, horizontally in this context. So you have the corners in order to extend diagonally. Again, if I press Alt, I'm going to scale not proportionally, but in all direction. But if I press the Shift key, you can see how I'm going to constrain my scaling. Okay, so let's go ahead with, let's do it again. So let's say I want to scale it in a proportional way. I can press the Shift key. It's proportional. If I want to scale it in all directions, I can press the Alt key. So in this case, it's like scaling it along its center if you want. And other cool stuff that you can do is if you put your cursor in between two squares, you can see you have the skew option, okay, which is sometimes useful. So you can skew, basically. You can do that also in the other axis. And one last thing that you can see, so I'm gonna like press enter in order to validate, and I'm going to press Ctrl T again. One nice thing that you can do is also change the pivot point of your transformation. So you can see that here I have a small target if you want. And if I'm putting it, for instance, in the corner here of this strange shape, and I rotate. So by the way, in order to rotate, you have to go around your selection, whatever you are around the tool. You can see that the UI, you can see that it's going to enable you to rotate. And you can see that in this case, because I've put the target on the corner, I'm rotating around this point. And if I'm putting it there, I'm rotating around there. Okay. The cool thing is that, again, your tool options. Okay, so I'm going to undock it again just to show you. Let's put it over there. You can see that here I can say, okay, go back to the center. And I simply click there and it's going back to the center. Okay, I can also say go to a corner. So it's going to a corner. Pretty cool. I can also say, like, of course I have different options there, but I can say, okay, mirror this shape. Okay, horizontally or vertically. Rotate this shape 90 degrees. Okay, like my selection actually. So this is the pretty cool options that you have there, and there are more options that are pretty neat. I'm going to show how they work. So one option that's cool is the ability to rotate your shape in 3D. So you can press Control while your cursor is outside the selection square. Sorry, the tool. You press Control, and now you can trackball rotate your selection. It's like working with your object you're drawing in 3D space. So this is pretty cool because actually, let's come back, let's deselect. Wow, I made a very long tool option docker. Oh, again, sorry. So you can see how noob I am with this window. So the cool thing is that I can, for instance, grab a simple square selection. I can make this square, and now I can simply press Ctrl T, and with Control and around, you can see how I can start to create a wall like that, okay, in perspective. So this is a pretty neat feature actually. One way you can come back quickly to your transform tool when just after you have pressed enter is if you have this tool selected. So this tool is, by the way, is the icon for the transformation tool, Ctrl T. You can simply just click, and as you can see, it will come back with the tool, the gizmo. Okay, so pretty cool. Okay, so you can see you have a lot of options, and I really want to share them with you because they are pretty cool. So this one, too much pretty cool, by the way. I'm saying too much pretty cool, but this is true. Like Krita is pretty cool. So you can see that here you have like the perspective option, which enables you to like change the perspective of your object, and you can see the here you have the vanishing points. So that's also a neat feature because you can move. You can just move your vanishing points. So in this case, I've put a mess, but I can put them like that, and as you can see, it works quite neatly. Here, so this one is like default in a lot of situations. Here I have the wrap tool, okay, the mesh deform tool. Basically, I can pick the different points, and I can squish my shape inside this new shape if you want. So sometimes useful. And with this one, there is like some stuff that I want to show you because they are cool. Okay, so I'm going to create like just a simple brush stroke like that. Let's make it like vertical, something like that. Okay, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go with again this one. So you can see I can simply transform, I can do my stuff like that, so basic stuff. And the cool thing is that here you can subdivide more. So if you want to be more precise about your shape, you can do that, and you can just move the points and this way. Here you have like different ways of like saying your of like the strength, if you want, of your point. But here you have like something called flexibility that basically will try to go towards the different points. I never use this feature, and I will advise not to. But here in the anchor point, you have a very, very interesting feature called the draw one. So here, as you can see, I can draw different points. okay? And then I say lock those points. And with those points being locked, I can move my different points, okay? So in this context, like I was expecting a much more interesting, I was expecting a much more interesting result, but let's do it again. So let's add more points. I'm gonna lock the points. Okay, now it works. I don't know why it didn't work, but you can see that all the points are locked and I can move the different points. And this is neat because I can like if you want like having a puppet under my stylus, I can pose my selection, okay? So of course use that with care because like it deforms a lot and it can create some artifacts, but the only fact that you have this already built in Krita is pretty interesting. So here you have a cage. Basically the cage is like the mesh deform, but you define you define your different points, okay? So deform selection, something like that, and then you press enter. Oh, sorry, no, you don't press enter. So let's do a cage again on top, something like that, okay? And now you simply pick the point and you can move them, okay? It's not that precise again, but it can be useful in some situation, okay? So, and this last one, I'm using it a lot. I'm not going to show you the last one here because I never used it, to be honest, but I'm going to show you Liquify, okay? So I'm going to press Ctrl T, and here I have Liquify. And Liquify is a very cool tool in your tool bag because you can see, you can push around and you can basically sculpt your shapes, okay? So pretty neat because you can correct small mistakes you're doing by this tool. And the shortcuts are the same than with the brush, so you can change the size over there, but you can press the Shift key in order to scale horizontally in order to change the size of the brush, okay? So this is a shortcut we're going to discover in the brush tool later on. So remember it's Shift plus horizontal move of the stylus, okay? So Liquify, or the Liquify tool, yes, has different options. So you can see that you have the size, which enables you to grow your brush, your shape, sorry, your pixels. You can also say you rotate, so it creates like like a tornado if you want. So I can go pretty neat with those kind of stuff. So something like that. Flow, honestly, I never used it before, so I don't know. It's creating like a weird flowing thing, and this eraser simply removes the action that you've done, so I can erase everything that I've done with the Liquify tool. So one cool thing also that you have in this Liquify tool is that, for instance, for the size, here, let's say I want to go down, like I want to decrease. I can click the reverse option there and it's going to decrease. But there is also a shortcut, which is the Control key. So if I'm pressing Control, I'm going to do the opposite thing of the setting I've selected. So for instance, here I have the move. If I press Control, you can see I'm moving to the opposite side. Okay. So this is the Liquify tool, and just a small thing that you have to know about Liquify. It can get pretty slow. So if you just liquify your whole space, so here I've like selected everything and I'm going to liquify everything, you can see even with a good computer it can be pretty slow. So my advice will be to select the thing you want to liquify. So here I'm selecting this Pac-Man-like shape, selecting liquify, and you can see how fast it can be. Okay, so this is for the Liquify tool. But now I'm going to be shortcut guy again, because I want to share with you how to have quick access to a bunch of options there, like meaning the different like ways of like changing your transform tool. So when I'm in tab mode, in canvas only mode, now what I can do, and what you've learned, is I can select with S, I can transform with Ctrl T, I can move, I can rotate, etc. But if I want to change the transform tool, I can also press right click with my stylus, and you can see that I have access to mirror horizontal, mirror vertical, I have access to the liquify over there. So I don't, in this case it's going back each time to the transformation tool. But usually that's the way to be fast and efficient with the transform tool. Okay, so you have Ctrl T under your hand and you just rotate. Again, right click liquify. If you want to liquify quickly, you can press enter in order to validate, and Ctrl D to deselect. Okay, and also remember that we have the H for horizontally mirroring the view. Okay, it's not mirroring the image or the layer, it's mirroring the full canvas. Okay, so pressing tab, I can come back with the default view. So the tools that I've shared with you until now are basically the tools that I'm using the most, except one, that is the brush tool, and we're going to come back to it. But before, I'm just going to share with you like the bucket tool and the gradient tool that I use also a lot when doing concept art. So the bucket tool, pretty easy. You just select it over there, or you press the F key in order to fill. It's going to simply fill the things. Okay, so you can just fill. But as you can see, as you can probably imagine, you have like options in the tool options there. So you have a threshold, okay, that enables you to determine to fill like shapes that are not so dark and that may be understood as open area for Krita. So here, those kind of stuff, you have like, you can grow the selection. Like if I'm painting, you can see it's going to overlap. So let's go back, Ctrl Z multiple time. If I have 0 pixel, you can see it's going to like stop at some edges. If I grow the selection a little bit, it's going to overlap from that amount of pixels. So sometimes useful when you have to fill like areas like that are a bit noisy regarding the strokes. You can also say that you want to use patterns. So patterns are located there in Krita, and they are like, as the name suggests, they are patterns. So if I want to fill a half-tone pattern over there, I can do that. So you have multiple patterns in Krita. I'm not using them a lot, to be honest with you, patterns, unless I want to do a paper-like feel behind, like paper canvas. This is the paint bucket, and of course it's going to select the color that's right under this box there, the first one, or the color that you've picked over there in the advanced color selector. A faster way for me to fill a shape with color, in other words, the paint bucket, is to select, for instance, the thing that I want to paint and press backspace. Oh, okay, let me rewind what I'm saying and press X, and X, as you can see, it's going to flip the color that you've selected, and you press backspace. Okay, backspace basically fills the selection or the layer, if you don't have any selection, with the color that is the background color. And the way to flip the color is from the foreground to the background is to press X. Okay, so that's sometimes useful. And if you click those two buttons over there, you're going to be back with black and white. Okay, neat thing to know. Okay, so usually when I'm doing like fast lasso concept art painting, I'm doing this a lot. So I'm picking, for instance, like let's say those are mountains. I'm picking the color I want, X, backspace, and I'm filling the shape. So pretty quick. Okay. So this is for this tool. Let's show you now the gradient tool, which is like you can press G. So F is for the fill and G is for the gradient. And here, okay, pressing X to switch the color, you can see I'm playing with a gradient. So in order to change the gradient information, you click this box and you have a lot of different gradients over there. Feel free to add your own. So of course I can press add in order to add a gradient. So here with the small cones or triangles, I can change the different colors. So let's put something like that. You can choose the different colors that you want. If you want to add one in the middle, you can simply press. Okay, let's do the worst gradient in history. And you can also like simply move the triangle out and it's going to delete it. Okay, so if let's say you have many of them like that, you simply drag it outside and it's going to be removed totally. Okay, so you can also see that you have the opacity of your gradients if you want to change the transparency of the color, and you can name it, for instance, Sosumix, and you can press close or fermer in French. And you can see that now I have this new gradient over there that I can of course delete if I don't want it. Okay, you can create folders for different, like if you want to categorize them, you can add some tags with them, but usually you're not doing that. Okay, so this is the gradient tool, pretty basic gradient tool. You also have like a repeat option there and a reverse option, and if you want, you have also the shape. So if you want to do a radial one, you can see you can do it like that. So let's pick a more interesting gradient. Let's pick this one for now, and you can see how I can create a radial one. And if I reverse it, it's going to simply reverse the order of the colors. I can repeat also, so you can see how it's going to repeat. If you do a very small pixel like there, and if it wasn't repeating, you can see it will like clamp, basically extend the further color. So in this case, it's extending this color on the side. So you have cone, you have like spiral. Spiral is quite cool with repeat. As you can see, you can create nice spiral like that. So yes, a lot of options with the gradient tool. I'll let you explore a bit on your own. I'm pretty sure you're gonna find like, tons of use with that. So we've discovered many tools. Let's discover some other tools. So which one should be next? Okay, I think I want to show you the. So I'm gonna press delete in order to remove this awful art. Sorry, I picked the wrong one. I wanted to show you this tool, but let's first delete the content of this layer by pressing delete. And there is this tool. So this tool called the assistant tool, or like a helper tool in English probably. Basically, you create dots in this case, and for this case, it's going to create ellipses. So as you can see that now when I'm pressing B, like my brush is like not constrained, but it's like helping me with guides underneath. Okay, so that's not that useful, I would say. So I will go with the tool options, and I would say snap to assistant. And now, as you can see, it's snapping to like the assistant tool. So that's pretty cool. Okay, that's a very neat tool if you want to draw perfect ellipses. So remember that with the brush, you can press Shift in order to decrease the size. Okay, so that's the shortcut. It's also seen there. So if you want a precise pixel size, but you can see that here I can create like pretty fast ellipses and pretty perfect one. So let's go back with the assistant tool. The cool thing is that you can always move your assistant tool, select the points, change them like that, make them visible or not, and more than that, you have a lot of different like assistant tool, as you can see. So I'm going to press this button, so in order to clear the assistant tool, and I'm going to delete this layer by pressing the garbage icon, and I'm going to add a new one there. Okay, we're going to come back with layers later on, don't worry. So for the assistant tool, here I'm going to go with perspective. And I'm going to add perspective points like that. And as you can see, I can create a grid simply like that, and I can change it. And this is, so I can create as many as I want, but I'm going to delete this one. So each time I'm making the mistake of not clicking the right button, I need to click in this toolbox there, over there. Okay. So you can see I can change the points, and I can make a pretty cool environment helper tool like that. I can make another one if I want to have, like for instance, a wall over there. And also I can change the color of my assistant tool. So if I change the color, it changes for everything. Okay, I can change the opacity of my tool, and I can say I want a custom color for the currently selected one. So in this case, I want a very dark purple for my custom one. So this is cool, I can do that. And each time I'm switching between the different gizmos, like the different tools, you can see I can add a custom color. So let's add a very reddish one, for instance. And again, if I press the B key, now I can draw in perspective. But I can draw in perspective, but I'm not like snapped to it. So in order to snap, it should be working though. Yes, okay. With the snap, it's working right now. And I need to define in which angle I am. So that's pretty much how how those tools are working. I don't know why I cannot delete them. Sometimes it's a bit buggy, but this is how you work with the different assistant tools. And as you can see, there is spline, infinite roller. The infinite roller is pretty cool. It enables you to simply draw lines infinitely. So in this case, I'm gonna not snap, or apparently I don't have any choice in this case, but basically it's creating a line. But of course there is easier way to create lines in Krita. So this is the assistant tool, and you can click this button to remove all the assistants that you have, and you can also save assistant sets, meaning like presets that you've made. For instance, with the perspective grid that I've done, I can like save it to reuse it in another scene later on. So that's pretty cool in terms of options you have with the assistant tools. Delete the layer, add one, or like press delete in order to remove the content of the layer. Okay. So we've seen a lot of tools. There are more. One that you may want to know is this one. The crop tool enables you to simply resize your canvas. Another way to resize the canvas is to go with image, and you have resize canvas over there. Basically, you can change the size of the canvas. So let's say I want to make it like wider. I uncheck the constraint proportions, otherwise it's going to keep the same aspect ratio. So in this case, I'm going to put like a very wide width, and I can say for on which side I want to extend it. So you can see with this small icon there, I can select the direction it's going to extend, so the offset basically, or I can select a preset. So here you can see that it's going to add the remaining width on this side. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Boom, I have a wider canvas. Okay. You can also resize the image over there, scale to new size. You can like do a lot of things. Okay. So for now, those are the tools that I want to share with you. There are more tools, of course, that you can discover, but for beginners, I will say those are your basic tool set, except again, just one, that is the brush tool. I've been teasing it since a long time, but I think this is the strength of Krita. Okay. Krita has, for me at least, the best brush engine of the whole market. And I've worked with a lot of softwares, 2D softwares. be it Clip Studio Paint, PaintStorm, Rebel, Photoshop, Corel Painter, whatever. Like, I feel personally that Krita has the more as the strongest brush engine, and also like the more versatile and the more natural feeling and good feeling brushes. So the brush engine, the basics are there. Let's pick a black color, okay? So in order to change the scale, you press the Shift key, you know that, okay? And as you can see, I have here a brush collection with a lot of tools by default. You can pick whatever brush you want. They are all going to react differently. So this one, they are painter lead. By default, they are already pretty cool, like the different like brushes that you have access to. You can enable them all. As you can see, you'll have tons of more brushes. And there are brushes that you won't have, such as those ones. They are brushes that I've imported in Krita. They are called the Impressionism brushes, I think. And as you can see, they add colors and they have a very nice texture feel. So lots of brushes there. Even this one is really cool. As you will see, it's a lasso brush, enabling you to do shapes. And this is pretty cool. Like, if you want to work with shapes and like do concept art in that way, you can do it pretty quickly with not a bunch of effort. Okay. Again, if you don't have this panel, you know, settings, Docker, brush settings, brush presets. Sorry. So lots of different brush types. So here, for instance, you have a like a watercolor like type of like brush. You can see how it like simulates the water. You have over there, you have like sponges to make like sparkles. You have markers, different markers. So those ones, I think they are like brushes that I've imported. You have like different shapes, things that I don't know why they should be useful in this case. But basically like charcoals, brush, like pastels, markers, very big like markers, highlighters. Basically, I'm using only a few brushes when I'm working, when I'm doing digital painting work. Because like in the end, it's not about the brush. It's more about like what you do with the brushes, of course. But the brush can give you a very expressive feeling in your work and can help you achieve the vision you have. But you should never be bothered with the brush and thinking that you have to download different brushes and tons of brushes in order to make your beautiful artworks. Okay, so I'm just closing this disclaimer. This disclaimer, but like it's really important, especially if you're a beginner. You probably think while watching speed painting on YouTube, so like going on Instagram or whatever, oh, those brushes are cool. No, the artists that are using those brushes are cool. And this is what you should target, especially if you're a beginner. Like you should come back to the art fundamentals, and we're going to cover some of them later on in this tutorial. But like brushes are not important, okay? They're important tools. You should have brushes, but they're not what makes your art beautiful, okay? And that's why I'm using a few brushes only in Krita, okay? Or sometimes I'm using them to make effects or something like that. But basically, as soon as you have a brush that can put paints on the canvas, you're pretty good to go, okay? So again, shift and slide left and right to quickly access this slider. Opacity is over there if you ever need to change it. Basically, it means that you have to accumulate your paint strokes in order to have a solid color, okay? If you want to erase, and this is going to be something very specific to Krita, you have to switch the mode of your brush. Okay, so your current brush is going to become your eraser. And in order to do that, you press the E key. And as you can see, my current brush is going to erase. Okay, this is strange for Photoshop users, for instance, but once you get the hang of it, you can find that it's pretty cool. Because actually, let's say that I'm using, this time I'm using currently I'm using this brush that I really like. You can see how texturally this brush is, how textured this brush is, sorry. And if I'm pressing E, you will see that I will basically, using the same material, I will be able to erase. And this is, trust me, pretty cool. But of course, if you want to use brushes that are equivalent to erasers in other software, such as the hard eraser, the round eraser, you can still use those brushes that are acting as erasers like in other softwares. Okay. So you also have like the soft one, okay, if you want to erase quickly, but in a soft manner like that. Sometimes I'm also using the airbrush. So in order to, for instance, let's say that I'm doing a lasso paint, I'm going to add some brush paint over there, and if I press E, I'm gonna have like an airbrush eraser, okay, which is like pretty cool. So this button over there is the eraser mode, okay? So please remember that you always have this, and you can also click there to reset the preset of the current brush, okay? So let's say that you've messed around with the settings of like this brush, like it's too big and you want to come back to the original size, just click this button and you're back with the original brush. So now for the brush settings, if you click on this button over there, you have all the options that are available for the brush, okay? And you can even make your own, which is of course something important. So if you want to go with advanced settings, so here you can see that we're not going to cover everything, because I think that everything makes sense when you're a more advanced user, and this is still targeting beginners, and I think that the default brush like are good enough for like 99% of what you want to do in a digital software. But just to give you small pointers. So the flow are the basic settings of the brush, if you want, so rotation, the size, the spacing, etc. You have the strengths of the brush over there. You have like the opacity of the brush. You have the tip, like which tip do you want to use. So in this case it's a circle or it's a square, for instance. You have on the bottom here if you want to add the texture. So here I'm going to add a pattern like that. The texture, I can pick it. You can see how it changes the brush over there. If you open this there, you have a small scratch pad just to test your brush, okay, as you can see. So this is cool. You can erase that. You can fill the area with a gradient also if you want to make a nicer background. Basically this is going to also represent the icon that will be shown displayed over there in the brush preset when you make your own brush, okay? So you can also say, okay, I'm going to remove this pattern because it's, for whatever reason, it's making the brush a bit slow. But you have a lot of different options. For instance, let's say that you want to change the size. So I'm going to change the size over there with the pressure sensitivity. You know, you can see that when I'm pressing slightly on the page, it's very small, and as soon as I press harder, it's getting bigger. And I can also change the way it reacts. So basically, this represents the pressure from low to high, and this represents the output on the y-axis, like how is the scale going to be affected. So I can add some points, and if I want to make a very, very responsive brush, I can do something like that. So I will have to be very subtle with the pressure until it gets pretty thick quickly, okay? So, and in reverse, so you can drop the points outside if you want to remove them, and in reverse I can do a pretty sharp curve, so I will have to press a lot harder in order to have like the thick brush, okay? So you have like different things, like distance is like the distance between like steps in the brush, etc, etc. So lots of different options. I'll let you work with them, like try them, and make your own brush if you feel the need. Honestly, you probably won't feel the need because the default brushes are quite there, like quite impressive already, but you have the ability to change them. And of course, you can always reset the brush to make it like the default one over there. And before leaving you with this topic, you can also save the preset, of course, over there, which creates a new brush for you. So that's it for the brush settings that you have over there. Just something to show you is how to import brushes in Krita. You can go in the settings and manage resources over there, and like you have different packs, especially on the Krita website, that you can import. And one of it is called the Impressionism brushes, made by Ramon Miranda, doing actually also great tutorials on Krita on the default Krita channel on YouTube. And you can just load them and push them to this side using the arrows, and they will be available in your brush presets over there. So let me undock the brush preset just to make it a bit bigger. Sorry. Not there. Again, I'm not precise today, I don't know why. But you can see that you have all the brushes over there that are visible. And if you want to sort them by different tags, you can do that. And that's a neat way to organize your brushes. So you have the sketch brush, you have like the paint brush that are separated in order to not have a lot of like brushes in your palette basically. But you can also add some tags. So here we can create a new tag. So let's call it Sociomix. And here for all the brushes, I can pick one, for instance, and let's say I want to pick this one, and I can right click and assign to tag to Sociomix. And now when I go to Sociomix, you can see I have my brush in there. Okay. So that's a way to organize the different brushes. And of course, you can also say, I want to rename this tag to test plus, and now it's going to be called test. Okay. And if I want to delete this tag, I simply delete this tag, and now I don't have this tag anymore in my collection. Okay. So just remember, that's a nice way to organize your brushes. Okay. You can also assign shortcuts to brush, and this you have to enable a small Python script to do that. So just to show you, because this is quite nice, you can go with tool and scripts, and here you have like something called 10 brushes. And when you enable that, you simply drag and drop, like you simply, pick a brush. So let's go with the sketch one, and I'm going to go with the one I like at this moment, which is this one. And I can pick the first shortcut that I want, and I assign it directly. Okay. So let's say that I want also to have an eraser, for instance. In this case, I can simply say, okay, I pick the eraser I want, and I push it there. Okay. And in order to do that, you simply have to enable this Python script. So you can press OK, and you can go also in the settings. So if you want to have different shortcuts, you can go into settings, and I think you can type 10 brushes there over there, and you should have access to the settings. So sorry, you have to type brush, and you will see scripts there in the section, and you have 10 brushes, and now here you can set up the shortcuts. So basically, that's how you can add shortcuts to brushes in Krita. So now when I press the key on top of QWERTY, so because I have a French keyboard, it's like AZERTY, but you can press 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see it's changing my brushes. Okay, so that's a nice way to have brush shortcuts. If you want to, for instance, work while being in full vision mode, you can see how this is a nice way to access your tools without like seeing UI. So we have a lot of things to cover still, so I'm going to go forward with that, and just to show you how to quickly deal with colors in Krita. So one way to pick a color from the canvas is to press the Control key in order to sample the color that's right under the mouse. And this is something useful when you're blending. For instance, like let's say I have a pure red, I have an orange over there, and I want to blend the colors together. Okay, so one thing that I can do is I can pick this color by pressing Control. I lay on top a color and I pick the intermediary color. So I just need to press not that hard. Okay, so because of the opacity of the colors, you can see in the brush pressure of the graphics tablet, you can see how the colors are overlapping, but they're not fully putting the color on the pixel. They're not replacing, if you want, the colors. That's a way to blend, and simply picking, Control, releasing, and this is like a pretty good habit of digital painters, painting artists. They usually blend like that because it's the fastest way to blend and to merge color together, if you want. About that, there is a really nice feature in Krita that enables you to darken and lighten the color by shortcuts. So you can press the K key. As you can see, K is going to drop the light of my color, okay, until you go to the darkest dark. Okay, so let's say I'm having a red. I press K, I go darker. I press K, I go darker again. I press K again, and I'm at the black. Okay, now let's go with the light. I can do the same thing with the light. So I can press L, and this is going to increase by increments, as you can see, my values for the light part of my color. So this is pretty cool, actually, to know. So yes, again, K for dark and L for light. I'm not using that all the time, just so you know, because I really like to pick my colors in the color wheel. Okay, so talking about the color wheel, you can see that here you have like options for the color wheel. So you can see that here I'm in a square mode with the values organized that way, but you can still pick the triangle one if you want. You have also like different modes for the colors you want, but usually I'm staying with this default behavior. Okay, and you have like color hotkeys if you want, like the steps, change the steps for what we said previously, the K and L shortcuts. You can change the steps over there. This is pretty cool if you need to do that. So let's press OK, and yes, that's the way I'm working with colors in Krita. You can also save different palettes. If you want to go in the Docker, you have palettes over there, and here you can pick with different colors. You can add new colors to your palette. If you need, you can create different palettes here by pressing plus. I can add a color. Let's say I want to add this red, and OK, it's over there. I can create not this one, but this is for adding a color. Editing this palette is over there. I'm trying to make this bigger over there. Yes, this one. So yes, you can see how so I think this is like a default palette, but I have like tons of palettes over there. So you simply click the icon there, you can add a new one. Let's call it Sociamix. Oh, Sociamix. And now I have a new palette. I can add my different colors in the buckets, okay, if I need to. That's pretty cool. And I can remove the colors, of course. And I can also delete the palette over there. Okay? So, I'm honestly never using palettes in my own work, but probably I should. So, this is for the colors. So, the last thing that is quite interesting is for the picking tool. You can just go over there. This is the sampling color tool, as you can see. But there is a tool option for this one that you can find in the Docker. Let's go with tool options over there. And there is, with the eyedropper tool, there is a blend option that is quite nice, and I'm going to show how it works. So I'm going to put it at 50%, and I'm going to come back with my brush by pressing B. Okay, and let's say that I have a pure red, and I have a blue. Okay, and let's say that I want to pick this red. So I'm going to pick the red, but as you can see, it didn't pick the full red. Okay, it took a time to go to the red that I'm picking under my mouse. Okay, now I'm going to go Control and picking the blue. You can see it's going to pick a median color between the current color I am and the blue. And I have to pick a lot in order to come back to this blue. So why I'm saying that is I'm saying median color because I've put 50% in the tool options of the eyedropper tool. If I put 100%, I'm picking a color. It's picking directly the color that is under. So this option is a nice tool to add a bit of variation with your pick. So for instance, let's say I'm close to 100%, but I'm not 100%. This adds a bit of variety between the colors you're picking. So let's say I'm going to blue. You can see how it's not like the exact same blue. So in this case, it probably is a bit, but you can see how it takes a time to go toward the blue, okay, or toward the colors that you're picking. So that's just a nice tip if you want to have it. Usually I'm like staying with the 100%, but sometimes when I do like very like realistic painting style, I like to have this blend option enabled, okay, because it adds a bit of variety in the colors I'm picking. So this is the colors. I'm going to show you how to save your workspace because we didn't talk about that. So let's say that you have like your view that you're liking a lot. So let's make the brush come back, brush preset. And let's say I'm happy to work like that. And you want to save it, you can go over there and you can save your workspace. So here I'm going to call it test. I save it. And it's over there. Okay, so each time I'm like having a default workspace, so you can see you have different workspace available. You can go with the one that you've saved over there. Okay, and you can save it like that. So that's pretty cool. Just a small feature, but easy to remember. So now let's speak about layers in Krita. So layers are quite important in any digital software. So let's say that I have a red like that. I can create a new layer on top and I'm putting a blue. You can see that the blue is on top of the red. If I pick this icon, you can see how it enables the layer or not. When I'm pressing Ctrl T by default, you can see it's selecting what's on this layer. So that's quite important to know. You can see also that I can reorder layers, simply drag and dropping them like this. What I can do on top of that is I can select the content of the layer by pressing Ctrl and clicking on it. You can see how it creates a mask. This is sometimes useful when you need to recolor something, or you need to mask something. So you can see how it's working pretty neatly. You can group layers too by selecting, by pressing Shift. You can select multiple layers, and if you press Ctrl G, yes, you can group the layers. So now when I select the group, you can see it's moving the full group. Okay. So I probably have like some pixels that are over there. That's why my selection is bigger. You can ungroup layers by simply moving them out and selecting the group and removing it. You can rename a layer by double clicking on it. You can lock a layer by pressing this icon. So you can see, no, Krita is saying, no, you cannot. You can use this button on the far right to lock the transparency of the layer. This is cool because now when I will paint on this layer with my brush, I'm only painting on the pixels that were already present on this layer. Okay, so pretty neat feature, as you can see. I'm using that a lot. Usually what I'm doing is I'm doing selections, painting like that, and I'm locking the pixels so I don't have my selection, and I can work like that. Okay, I'm sure I will never work on pixels that are not available, basically. By the way, just a small shortcut that I forgot to share with you. Like when you are selecting something, sorry, you need to remove this button, otherwise you're not going to be able to paint because there is no, on this layer at least, because there is no pixel information, okay? Sometimes you can get confused about that. So let's say I have this selection, but it's bothering me to see the outline there. I can press Ctrl H, and Ctrl H is not removing the selection, it's just hiding the visual of the selection, okay? So a nice thing to know, you can still have your selection and paint like that. So for instance, a way to do this is a way to do the same thing than alpha clip, is simply to press Ctrl click to select the pixels that are on this layer to do an actual selection, and I can press Ctrl H to hide the selection, and I can work without having this information in the way. Okay, so this is another way if you don't want to alpha lock your layers. Okay, so let me select all those layers and just show you how. So I was going to delete them, but before that I'm going to share with you a shortcut that's quite nice. It's Ctrl E. You can merge the layers together. So now I have only one big layer. Okay, so no more possibility of putting them on top of each other. My shapes, actually. I can also select something in a layer and press Ctrl C, Ctrl V. As you can see, it's going to create a new layer. And for instance, I can go back on this layer and press delete in order to remove the blue shape that was on this layer, but I've duplicated and put it on another layer. Okay, so that's a quick way to re-separate to a certain amount some shapes from your different layers. So press Ctrl E to merge again. There is also, like, of course, blending mode. So I'm going to add a new layer like that. I think the shortcut is insert, yes. And let's say I want to darken some parts. I can like put, I can put blue over there. You can see that here the blue is like the real blue that I've set, but you have a lot of different blending modes. Here you can even like open like thousands of them. Okay, so now I want to cover the basic blending modes, the one that we're using often when painting with a layered approach. But before showing you those blending modes, what I want to do is I'm gonna just drop a simple gradient, okay, a black and white gradient, and I want to explain how the computer sees the values of the color. Actually, the black is 0 for Krita, and the white is 1, okay? And of course you have all the values in the middle. Like in the center, a mid-gray is 0.5 in terms of value, okay, towards 1, okay? So if you're talking about color instead of pure black and white, basically a color has 3 channels for the red, for the green, and for the blue, RGB we say usually. And they are between, each channel is a value between 0 and 1, and when you combine them together, they create the color. So basically, if we put a red, okay, basically what Krita sees behind the scene is 1 for the red, and there is no green information in this red, so 0, and for the blue, there is no blue information over there, okay? And this is actually what you see when you specify the color by different numbers. Okay, so it's quite important to have this in mind. Okay, like pure green, for instance, like pure green, instead of like having 1 in the red, you don't have red in green, in pure green. So here it will be 0, and here, as you can see, it will be 1. Okay, And if you mix like the different channels of the colors, you will have different results, of course. For instance, one in red one in red and one in green will be yellow. Okay. And of course, if you want something that goes more toward the red, like meaning orange, you decrease a little bit this value, okay? Make it a bit lower. So for instance, in this case, I don't know exactly, but it can be like 0.6 or something like that. Let's say it's 0.6. So basically, that's how color works, at least how they are seen by the computer, okay? And basically what blending modes are doing is, let's say we have a layer. So this is a layer with different pixels. So a pixel is actually just a small square with color information in it. And what layers are doing, what blending modes, are doing, is that for each layer, they are taking the pixels on the top, matching with the pixel on the second layer. So I'm gonna emphasize that this one is on top of the other one. And let's make this pixel a little bit more grayish. So this is layer A, and underneath layer B. Basically, for each pixel, like the corresponding pixel underneath, they are going to be blended together with a special formula. Okay, and there are many formulas possible. One of the most used, I will say, blending mode, so the most used formula, is actually the multiply one. So multiply is simple. You take the value of the color here of the pixel. So in this case, it's let's say this is black, so 0, and you multiply it with the pixel that is underneath. So if the pixel underneath is black, then you have black, 0. If the pixel underneath is 1, 0. And let's say that you're multiplying this time like 0.25, so something quite dark, but you're multiplying it with, for instance, something that is 0.5. Okay, now you'll get something like 0.125. Okay, so even darker color than those two. Like here, of course, I'm talking with like one value, but it applies to colors. So, like, remember that colors are triplets of values. So, like for instance, this is red. So if I'm multiplying 0.5. Like, let's say that I'm multiplying a dark red with a bright red. Okay, it's going to take this channel and multiplying it with this one. Hence, the final color here will be 0.5, 0, and 0. Okay, let's say that here I have like something like 0.2 in the green, and here I have 1 because it's easy for the calculation. You can see that the final color here will have 0.2. Okay. So basically, this is how behind the scenes the blending mode of multiplication works, and the result, graphically speaking, is something that will create a darker value where you paint on top. So let's pick a red. Let's pick also like dark orange. Something like that, just to make a gradient, a very smooth gradient. And let's say that I want you to paint something on top. I can like totally pick a purple, a dark purple like color, or even brighter, and I can like drop it like that. So without any blending mode, you can see that it's like the simple layer that is on top. But if I'm using multiply, you can see how it darkens everything. Okay. And the cool thing with layers is that you also have like this opacity slider. So if I'm if I'm decreasing the slider, you can see how we have, it's still darker, but we can a bit see that the colors underneath are still there. So if we pick the orange, the result of everything is now this color, and here on the red side it's this color. So we can still see that this is more red and this is more orange, but it's darker. Okay, so this is the multiply blending mode. It's used a lot when putting colors, when putting shadows, sorry, not colors, on a painting, for instance. So the next one is addition. So addition, simply, like, you remember what we've done, like in terms of formula, multiplying the colors. You do the same thing, but now you add. Okay, so easy enough. So let's put this color, okay, on top, and this one is going to be added, and you can see it's going to brighten the color. So even though I'm painting with like not mid-gray, but like not that bright color, you can see it becomes very bright. So this is very cool in order to put highlights or like make something shine, for instance. And you can see that, of course, I can also reduce the opacity and it will work the same way. Let's now pick, so let's remove this layer, and now let's add a new one, and let's now pick the overlay mode. So overlay mode is cool because, as you can see here, I've added an orange, and it creates it's hard to explain, like I don't want to explain the formula, but imagine that overlay is going to pump the colors a bit, like not pump, but like kink the color a little bit, like add more saturation to your colors, and like create, as you can see, it's overexposure, it's creating like an overexposure effect. So as you can see with white, I'm never going to reach white, okay? I'm always going to take the tint into account. So here I have like pure white in the whole thing. And you can see how it's like saturating the color and making them like more vivid, okay? So this is the overlay blending mode. Another mode that is used often is the color mode. So the color mode is cool because it doesn't affect the value of the colors, meaning the intensity of the color, if you want, but it only affects the tint. So let's press Ctrl and select the pixels of this layer, and let's put a giant brush of purple on top. You can see I've just changed the color of what's underneath. Okay, for like every, like the value, the gradient, if you want, is conserved, but the color has been changed. And the cool thing is that I can quickly say, okay, now on the right layer, now I want half green, the center being turquoise, for instance. It's horrible in terms of color, but it's just to show you that it's possible. Okay, so this is the color mode. Okay, and you can also, of course, mix it with what's below. Okay, so those are the main, I would say, mode that we use. Sometimes there is one that we use that is called soft light, but the Photoshop one, so you have to find it actually lighten, I think. It's this one, soft light Photoshop. And this one creates, it's like an addition if you want, but more subtle. Okay, so if you pick white, you can see it's more subtle. Okay, helps creating like subtle highlights. And I would say that that's it for the blending modes. So now the next option I will show you is actually quite confusing, but it can be very, very useful. So it's a way to do the clipping mask in Photoshop for Photoshop users. So here I'm going to paint a red circle. Pressing Ctrl J can group my layer, and I'm going to add one layer on top with green, for instance, and I'm going to paint something like that. If I'm clicking this option, you can see how it's going to be clipped from the layer that's below. Okay, so that's a nice way to do different shapes like that. And if I'm painting another shape on top and I'm locking again using this button, that's actually called, I don't know how it's called actually, but basically you can see how you can stack different, if you want, stencils like tools. Like it's like a stencil actually. And this is like the equivalent of the clipping mask in Photoshop. The neat thing is that if you remove this, you still have the rest, meaning that you can totally move this shape and it will be already be working. And in this case, it's not locking as you would probably expect this underneath shape. It's locking with the full stack of colors, so until the bottom one. Okay, just a small thing to remember. If you wanted to do this especially, you had to group the layers and you will have to remove this and lock the layer. Okay, so this situation. Okay, so I must admit this is not the easiest way in Krita rather than in Photoshop, but it's still doable like that. Okay, so we've seen layers. One thing to know about layers too, so let me like draw something, is that you have, like in Photoshop, options for them. So you can right click and go with layer styles, and here you can, for instance, do more standard stuff like having a drop shadow with like different information. You have inner glow, stroke, which will basically add an outline. You can see it's a bit slow, so I'm not using that every day, but that's a way to do it if you need to do it. So another thing to know is a nice thing actually to know is you have a way to recolor your layer by simply going in the layer here, filter here information. You have like adjustment layers like in every digital software. So you have the HSV adjustment, pressing Ctrl U, like in a lot of software. So this went on my other monitor, but basically you can change the hue, which is the tint of the color if you want. You can change the saturation, how much vivid it is if you want. So you can see zero saturation is gray, black and white basically, and the lightness is the intensity of the color. Okay, how much bright it is. So yes, this is the famous HSV adjustment way. You also have the other adjustments things possible over there. For instance, one thing that is quite nice is the auto contrast. It's going to try to get the contrast of your full image and to change, to balance it so it works well with the rest of your image. So for instance, let's say that I have those two colors. You will see that auto contrast will try to take the white pixels into account and like balance the colors so they work pretty well together. And this is a feature that I plan to show. I was planning to show in the bonus section, but I think it's actually better to show it right now. Is that you have different filters that you can apply on top. So probably the same filters that we've seen before, but when you apply them, for instance, auto contrast, over there it works, but you can also apply them as filter layers over there. So basically they become layers. Okay, so here I have an adjustment layer that I can change over there. Okay, and also, so now it's a layer, meaning that I can enable it on or off. And one of the things that is cool in Krita, is the Gimic plugin tool. Okay, so Gimic is an external plugin that gives you a lot of different filters that are like sometimes strange, but that are sometimes pretty cool. You have sometimes errors all with them, but like things like that, like you have the stylized one, vector painting that is pretty cool. It's trying to synthesize, trying to summarize your shapes. Yes, a lot of filters that you can find them. Here you have like different patterns effect, sponge effect. So yes, feel free to explore this window. I'm not going to do a full cover of this because it's like too deep, but you just know that you need to apply them over there, and this is going to be applied on the current layer that you're in. Okay, so that's Gimic actually, and that's a nice thing to know that exists. Okay, so now that you have a pretty good understanding of like the different features of Krita, of course we didn't cover everything. There is so many things to cover in Krita, but you should be already in good shape to start making art actually with the software. One thing that I want to share with you in this tutorial is the digital painting basics. So I want to share with you some very, very basic concepts about how to paint. Like this is going to be like a more artistic section of this video. But the idea is that after watching this full video, you will be technically okay, and you will be artistically ready to start learning about digital painting and actually doing your own paintings. So we'll be learning the basics and then applying them to a project that will be probably time-lapsed. But this is just to demonstrate the concepts that I'm going to share with you. So I will advise to take a break and to come back when you're ready. So now we are going to finally put something better looking on the canvas. We are going to start with the fundamentals of digital painting and what are the skills required. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, of course, in this video, but I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks. And then after that, it will be demo time, and I'm going to share with you a portrait painting in Krita. So the first thing I want to share with you are not painting skills, but drawing skills. So one thing to learn if you want to improve your drawing skills, and everything that I'm going to say, I'm still practicing them every day. It's like if you want to get better at drawing or painting, you have to go through those skills and to repeat them all the time and do exercises and apply them in your work. And it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to probably take you years before you're a good draftsman, and it takes a lot of time, but you have to enjoy the process of learning those things, and you have to be very positive about doing art. Otherwise it's going to be a nightmare for you. So just as a small disclaimer, you have to be in a very positive mindset if you want to become better at art. And to be honest with you, I'm not the best artist ever, of course, and like far from that, and I'm still doing exercises like master studies. I'm still drawing in sketchbooks, and yes, and open also my eyes, open my mind with like different artists that I look at. I have a lot of art books, and when it was possible, going to the museum was a very good source of inspiration. So if you want to become a digital painter or a concept artist, you have to be in this kind of mindset to be successful. I'm closing this small thought, and I'm going to share with you the basics of drawing. So the basics of drawing are the following, actually. There are many fields, but like the most basic things you will always see are like lines. Okay, so how do you draw lines with confidence? So you can see here, no undo, trying to define different lines, angles, and to control them. And I don't want to have like wobbly line like that. So the first thing is like learning and practicing, and this is not going to be pretty, but this is exercise. Okay, it's line control like the motion of your wrist and your elbow. So when you're drawing like big lines, you're drawing it with the full arm, the full forearm, and when you're drawing small lines, you can do it with the wrist. Okay, so this is quite important to practice this kind of exercise, because they are the fundamental of many shapes that we use when drawing. So one exercise that you can practice that is nice is you can practice drawing those kind of shapes. Like you put dots on the page and you try to connect them in one go, okay, in different angle. So this was I was cheating already, but basically, yes, try to do that. And if you need to, rotate the canvas. Like if I were drawing this kind of stuff in real life on a piece of paper, I will put the piece of paper in the perfect situation to draw the thing according to my best kinesthetic like skill, I would say, like my best like ability. So yes, practice those kind of stuff. They are quite important. So the next step is practicing curves. So curves, you have them everywhere in nature. Basically, they helps create rhythm in your artworks. Okay, they show like flow. Okay, they help creating like energetic things. You have them in grass. You have them in hairs. You have them in characters. To give you an example, this can be like the spine of a character with the rib cage, with the head. Okay, you have them in like limbs of characters too. Like for instance, let's draw a very simple leg, the symbol of a leg if you want more. You can see how we have curves here, and here we can have a curve that counteracts. So this one is offsetted according to this one, as you can see. Creates balance, actually. Here we have a nice sweep curve in a leg, also on the knee. So you can see like curves are everywhere actually in nature. So this is curve and lines. So they are your basic vocabulary, if you want. That's how you draw, actually. What you draw on the page. The next thing I would say that's quite mandatory to train is shapes. So shapes, we have 3 of them. So we have the circle shapes. Whoa, sorry, my hand gets a bit bad today, but like we have circles or circular shapes, we have square or rectangular shapes, and we have cylinders. So we're going to talk about forms a bit later on because like this matches with the cylinders, but we have triangular shapes. Okay, so practice drawing those shapes and squashing them. Like you want to massage them and like in your own shape. Like create like droplets of water, for instance. Those are still circles. Like rectangles, the same. You want to like squish them a little bit, make like even with curves a bit. Like you can see how you can stretch that. Think about like the carpet from Aladdin, for instance. You can see how they can be stretched like that. Like those are good exercise to practice, because this is another very important part of your vocabulary when actually painting and working with shapes. So for instance, triangles, you see them a lot in closes, for instance. Like this is like, let's say we do a drapery like that. You see triangles in a lot of different situations. You see squares also in a lot of different situations, and they have meanings also. Like in character design, for instance, this represents the cute aspect. Like, look, you can create a cute character like this. This is a more solid character. Like, I mean, like, I am the block. You can see how this character looks anchored to the ground. And this is like more, in character design represents more the angry characters, like characters that are that are aggressive. As you can see, like even pointy teeth, you can see them a lot in natures with animals that have horns, for instance, and things like that. Okay, so triangle, circles, and square, you need to practice them. A good exercise that you can try to do is like pick like a random shape that is more or less circular, one that is like more boxy, and one that is more triangular, and try to come up with like heads. For instance, in this one I'm going to do, like, let's say it was the cute one, so I'm gonna do the cute head with this one. I'm gonna add two circles to even add to add even more cuteness to this character. So this one will be more massive. You can see how already where it is going. It's more solid. I'm going to only work with this vocabulary, like straight angle. I'm gonna erase a bit this one, like straight angle, like making very solid shape. And you can actually play with the same concept for this one. So let's say that this one will be more aggressive. So for this one, I'm gonna make it as a bird, aggressive bird. So you can see how, like, it's quite simple to come up with like ideas based on those concepts of cute, even though this can be even cuter. Like, let's make this cuter. In order to make something even more cute, you can reduce the size of the features, the facial features. Bring the eye a bit closer, and you can see it's already more cute. Same for the squarish guy. If I push even further the design of the eyes, make them more squarish, you can see how he looks even more solid as a character. Okay, think about Monster Inc. Bob, or Mike, sorry, in English, is a simple sphere but a bit aggressive. Sully is a big giant square, pom pom of the leg, but a bit aggressive too. And I don't have a character for it. And for this one, for the triangle shape, let's think about like Maleficent from the Disney villain. So you can see how she has like a very pointy chin. Not going to draw everything, but like even the simple silhouette of this character is very, like with the horns, it's very pointy. Even the color. Okay, you get me. I'm not going to enter in too much detail, but yes, try to come up with your own characters with those shapes. And then the next thing that we have absolutely to master in order to improve our drawing is the sphere, the cube, the cylinders, and the cones, which are basically the analog version of the 2D shapes that I've shown you. So the sphere is the same as the circle. Basically, it's a circle, but we indicate the direction with across like that, or just a line, but like usually it's across. But you can see that this doesn't represent a lot of information in space. One way you can also do it is just by putting an ellipse inside. That's why it's important to work with your ability control, like your control with your hand. Sorry. But basically, as you can see here, I'm actually dealing with spheres, and the silhouette of those spheres isn't representing spheres actually. Like we can totally, if we put black in those shapes, you cannot think about spheres. It can be circles also. Okay, so it doesn't have a lot of visual 3D form. Okay, in terms of silhouette. The next shape that we want to learn is the cube. So the cube in 3D represents the most valuable shape because you have information about more axes. So in this case, you can see how we have this information, and the height information. So basically the x, the y, and the z axis. And you have many ways to practice cubes. Basically, one way is to think about the cube from imagination and draw it. One way is to take a plane and start extruding it, meaning you duplicate the plane just below and you connect the dots. You can even draw through if you want. And I will really advise you to work freehand and not using the line tool in order to practice, because in the end you want to master this from imagination, and you want to master this with your own hand. So yes, this is, for instance, what we call a 3-point perspective, because imagine that you project those lines, they will in the end connect to a dot. But if we do the same here, you can see that they connect to a dot, and you have another dot going this direction. So in the infinite there, they're going to connect to a dot. So 1, 2, and 3, 3-point perspective. This is a 2-point perspective because one dot, 2 dots, okay? And you have also 1-point perspective. So 1-point perspective is simply something like that, okay? I will say this is the least interesting shape when drawing cubes, but cubes are really the most important shape you will have to learn because they inform a lot about the shapes. You can see that it's also a way for me to quickly start creating a head shape. So if I divide the sides like that and add another box in the background for the head, I can start creating a head, for instance. Okay. So, and from any angle. And the cool thing is that this helps a lot. Even if you have a hard corner, this helps a lot seeing the perspective. Okay. So cubes are your friend. So the next shape is cylinders. So cylinders, basically, you can draw them like that by wrapping lines around in order to convey the shape. But basically, they are connecting two circles. So one circle, another one, and you join them by a tube. Okay. Let me remove a little bit. It's important also that you draw through the forms. You don't want to draw, for instance, like a cylinder like that when you're practicing. Even though you can do it, it's much better to draw it like that and actually see things through. So when I'm adding the lines that informs about the perspective, you can see that I'm drawing through, and then I can emphasize some lines in order to convey what's the most important thing of this object. So cylinders are quite important. They can represent joints, not joints but limbs, sorry, along with spheres to represent joints. So for instance, here I can create very quickly an arm. As you can see. So going in this direction, and here going in this direction. Okay, so you can create an arm. You can create wheels for vehicles. You can even, like, I'm sorry about this one. It's like quite off in terms of perspective. You can even like subtract some shapes, remove some shapes. So you can see how here I'm like removing a cylinder in the center, like that. And you start to see with my later example that the idea of drawing is combining those shapes together. So for instance, so the last shape that we have is the cone. Okay, we don't have cones a lot, so I'm just going to do a few ones. It's basically you start with a circle as the base and you extend it. Okay, but just to come back to what I was saying before the cone, like, yes, it's important to think about association of shapes. So for instance, if I want to create a head in 3D, I can start by creating a sphere. Okay, and I can start to add a more boxy shape for the jaw. Okay, something like that. And you can see how a box that is slightly carved out in the bottom plus a sphere indicates the basic forms of a cranium. And this we can do it in many angles, like a sphere plus the jaw that is a more boxy shape. We can even like create, as I was saying previously, a head with boxes. So for instance, I'm going to create a box, just only a one box. I'm going to put a circle inside this box just to help me define where the cranium will be. This is going to be the side, and I'm going to extend the jaw. I'm taking the head here just to have a subject in order to work with, but you can totally imagine how this applies to like every objects that you can imagine. Like for instance, like let's say I want to draw a hand. Like a hand can be like made from a box for the palm. Fingers can be extended as cylinders. Can create the wrist with a more box shape. Forearm, go that direction. Here I can create a sort of wedge shape for the thumb to extend. And the thumb will be like a cylinder shape too. It's a bit big in this case. But you can see how I can like totally, in a very simple way, define some shape. And this is like just the start of the drawing. Like the next step is of course to like refine it and to add some stuff on top, like some details on top. But you get me. Like if I want, for instance, like let's go with a foot. For instance, you want to create a foot. Okay, multiple ways. We start with a ball for the heel, a middle ball for the midsection, and a flat ball for the end, and we connect the piece, and then we have like a basic foot method, for instance. Basic way to create the foot. We add like the toes as ellipses, something like that. We add arcs on top of the 3D form, and we have the idea of a foot. And then we refine and we refine. We can also like say, okay, the foot is more or less a wedge shape like this, with a box behind. And that's why it's important to learn how to do that by hand and not by a line tool, because you don't want to spend your time by tracing lines. You want to be able to, when you draw, to freely approximate like the shapes that you want to draw. So in this context, you can see like I'm placing shapes on top of one another and this way. Okay. And like here in the center, you can have a more important mass, showing that the swoop that we have on top of the heel there, of the foot. So yes, it's a lot of like thinking about the structure of the things that compose the objects and the organic things that we see around us. So I will really encourage you to practice those shapes freehand, so we'll be able to draw them easily in 3D. Okay? So the next thing I want to share with you is shading techniques, and then I'm going to share with you a demo. Okay? So shading techniques. So what we're gonna do is going to be boring, and you've probably seen that elsewhere if you're like if you wanted to learn like concept art. But anyway, I'm going to share it with you again. So I'm going to draw a simple square like this. Going to grab my gradient tool, and I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to pick a dark gray and also a lighter gray like this, and I'm going to put a gradient to create a sort of brown. And while I'm there, I'm going to pick this color, and like I'm going to make like a circular bit gradient like this, just to create a ground. And on top of this ground, we're going to add another layer, and we are going to create a circle, a perfect circle. So pressing Shift and Alt to move it around here, and then I'm just going to fill it with a gray, like that. You can see how this is sticking to my mesh. And then, in order to make the sphere 3D, we have to think where the light is going to illuminate the scene. Okay, so the scene probably will have a light in this context that goes in from the top there. Okay, so that's what I'm aiming for. Okay, something like that. So I know I will have a shadow here. I know I will have like more highlight there, and I know that there will be some point on this sphere where the light will turn to a shadow. So this is probably shadow section. This is more bright. So let's first draw what we call the core shadow. The core shadow is the shadow that is core, meaning that it's the darkest shadow that we have in our drawing. Okay. I can even divide like my sphere to be more simple in just two pieces like this. If we had only two values to work with, I will do something like that. Okay. So the next thing is light that directly impacts the surface of the sphere. It will be probably on top there. Okay. And then we have also something called highlight. And highlight is like when the light directly hits the surface. So basically, if you think about like how light works, let's say that this is a surface from the sphere, from the side. If you have light coming there, okay, light rays hitting the surface, like this, and this section here is facing this direction, and here it's facing this direction. You can probably think that because this light here faces this direction, like face to face directly, you can probably say that this is going to be bright. Okay, so let me just put colors like this. You can probably say that this is going to be bright. Okay, and the more this surface turn away from the light, the more in shadow we're going to be. So here no light, here maybe a little bit, here a bit also, and here more and more and more toward the highlight. So this is like the basic idea of the lighting. Okay, so we are going to apply this, but thinking in 3D. Okay, so let's just select this, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, like that. Okay, so we know that this is going to be the highlight, as I said. Maybe we can pick a very bright color and make the highlight even more important. And one thing to note is that the light is going to bounce on the ground and come up a bit on this side. Not like if you look at my cursor on the color wheel here, because this is like the darkest shadow, I can even make it darker just to prove my point. Let's make it more dark like this. And here let's blend the things nicely together just by picking the color and going slightly toward the highlight color. Okay. So here I'm going to have reflected light, okay, that is never going to be lighter than this color. So if you look at this dot over there in the light part, sorry, and the dark shadow is there, you can only have colors in between this and this. Okay, so I'm going to pick this color, for instance, and I'm going to put a bit of reflected light over there, meaning that this is the light that bounces from the back and come back to the object. So the light goes there, hits the ground, and reflects to our sphere. Okay. So there is one part that is going to be very in shadow. So it's this one. Okay, because like light has a hard time going there. Okay, because the surface is so close to the ground that it's going to be hard. And here over there, I'm going to blend by just picking and like tone down my highlight, as you can see. Easy stuff. Let's pick a brighter bright and make a more important highlight. So you can see from far away we have some bending starting to happen. So bending is when you can see the gradation between the shadow and what we call the midtone. So the midtone is like what's in between shadow and light. And when you paint, try to go in the direction of the surface. Okay, so you see my stroke are not doing something like that. Staircase. They are going around the shape, like if I were a small ant going on top of the surface of my sphere. So the next thing is I'm going to put the shadow. So in order to put the shadow, I can simply, like using the lasso tool, I can simply like create the shadow shape. Something like that. And just where it's near the surface, I make it darker, and of course I make it under the sphere. And you can see a gradient, and I can press E in order to move my brush to eraser, and I can use a gradient to make it more light. And I will also, sorry about that, I will also push my shadow, if I can, a bit forward, because like of course there's going to be shadow over there because light is going to have a hard time reaching there. Okay. And I'm going to blur a bit like the end over there. And it's the good time to, I think, go to the filter and add a blur and a Gaussian blur filter. And I'm going to add like more blur on the horizontal than the vertical. So I'm going to disconnect that and push the horizontal blur. You can see it creates a more interesting effect because we are seeing the sphere from the side. Therefore the shadow is squished a bit. Therefore like the blur also. And with that, we have a basic, very basic and not interesting example like of a sphere, of the rendering of a sphere. Just to make it a bit more interesting, we can push the, oh sorry, let me grab back this. We can push even more the coarse shadow, so maybe not that big, something like that. I can even go a bit darker. And tone down a little bit the reflection part. And now what I'm going to share with you are techniques in order to make this kind of work more interesting in terms of like painting aspect. So now I'm going to group those layers together, including the ground actually. So I'm going to put the ground inside there. And I'm going to select the group, scale it down to the side, Control J. Oh, we forgot about Control J. Control J duplicates something in the layers. And when I say we, it's me. And Control J here. And now I'm going to share with you like techniques in order to make this more interesting. So now, if you go in the texture brushes, or more like the paint brushes there, you have some brushes like that, and those, after picking like your layer, and you can create a new layer in order to protect your work, we are going to like put brush strokes that are going to inform like a texture on there, and we're doing that just by picking what's underneath, like the color underneath, and just applying it approximately in the same area. Okay, trying to make sure we follow the shape. So you can see how already we're starting to have a more texturally sphere. Let's do the same for the highlight. And just by picking in a repetitive manner, trying maybe different brushes, you can see how you can quickly create a more interesting texture for this brush, for this sphere. Another thing that we can do, and let's do it with this, again with this example, is we can press E in order to have the eraser, and we can merge those two layers together, so the sphere plus the texture aspect. And now with a brush that is more textured, so let's go in all, and I think that this one is going to do the trick. So pressing E, access my eraser, and you can see how in a very non-perfect way I'm going to erase the borders of my sphere. This is going to make the thing looks more organic with a bit of defaults. And you know that we don't have perfect stuff in nature, or it's pretty rare when it's so polished. That is going to create a more like natural way for your object. Okay, so let's now go on top of that and be a bit creative in the painting aspect, so we can like blend a little bit, try to create like different layers of texture, making sure you keep the structure that we've defined there. Okay, so here you can see it's in there's a small shadow. We don't want that. I'm just going to press Control click on this layer just to make sure I don't go out, something like that. The more flat and big the highlight is, the more like diffuse the surface will be. Something like that. So you can see, and now it's just your artistic judgment to say if it's looking fine with you or not. And the last thing you can do with those kind of example is go into texture, and you have like those sparkles that you can put, sorry. So maybe this one there. And you can just like put some over there, and you just multiply them on top, and you lower down the opacity, and you added like a bit of texture. And as you can see here, you have a more rock material that creates an effect that is more interesting for the eyes. So this is one way of like rendering things. I've shown you like the very basic stuff. Actually, there is a lot more to rendering than this, of course. But try practicing like other shapes, like for instance cylinders. If you want to do like a cylinder, you can like first do the whole process. Let's go with a simple, a simple brush. Let's do the full process. Like I'm gonna first draw a cylinder by hand, something like that, going through the shape. I don't care because I'm gonna erase. Something like that. Sometimes you press H. Remember, it's the shortcut that we have set up in order to flip the canvas. This is pretty important because you can have a fresh eye on your work. Okay. And now with the cylinder, imagine that we have light coming from the top. So if we have light coming from the top, this is going to be pretty bright. Okay. And from the top, a little bit on the right, like the same basically. So now I can like go with a darker color, and I can start to map in a very crude way, like that this side is in shadow. But as this is turning away there, this is still flat. Okay, this is a cutting in a right angle over there. And as this is turning to light more and more, you can see I'm picking the values in between to create a gradient. This is never going to reach the level of intensity we have on the top. So this should be brighter than this, which is the case already. But I can emphasize it even more by picking a bright color. And now here it's just a matter of blending. So there is a multiple way of blending. I can zigzag around to create a more painterly feel, as you can see. I can perfectly blend with a airbrush, etc., etc. So it's up to you to actually create the thing. And now, as a good exercise, let's say that you want to carve half a sphere from this cylinder. So the first thing is to draw the shape. And now imagine the light is going to hit it over there. So now I can pick a bright over there, make the light appear there, and I know this will be in shadow. Okay, so I can just slightly try to massage my lighting toward this direction. As you can see, it gives the impression of having a hole in this thing. Okay, so this is the basics actually of shading. So now I'm going to share with you one technique to color your black and white painting that is quite nice. So I'm going to duplicate this last layer and I'm going to add a layer on top, and I'm going to merge, not merge, but I'm going to group everything underneath and press Ctrl click to have everything, or not, let's undo. I'm just going to pick the ground, okay, and I am going to make the ground a yellow color. So I will paint the color. Okay, but as you can see, the layer mode is multiply. I want it to be, okay, so I was on the wrong layer, sorry, let me add a layer. Okay, I was wondering why this is that way. So now what I've done here is I'm going to use the color mode to color the ground. Okay, so remember we've seen the color mode. And now I'm going to select my sphere, and I want to make the sphere maybe orange. So make sure you're on the right layer, something like that. And you can see how, because we've created the values of the color in black and white, even though this is not working, like because there are some mistakes in the way the colors are laid down, we still have an impression of 3D, and this can still be something that works. Okay, so the shadows are going to be, in this case, maybe a bit cooler, so I'm going to tint them a little bit. So okay, so let's go with shadow. I'm going to push them on top there and in color mode if I can. Okay, and here I will remove this part from this layer, so I'm selecting the orange and I'm removing, and I will, the shadow here, I will just tone it down a little bit, but this will create more interest in terms of color. It's not, like, I mean, it's not mandatory to have color in your shadows, but it's like a small thing that will add something. And you can press Ctrl U in order to tweak the colors too. So maybe it works better with like a slightly brownish color. So let's go with that. Okay. So one other thing that can help is, now that you've picked like colors, what I want to do is like let's pick the ground and let's remove the circle of the sphere. In order to do that, what I do is I Control click there and I press Alt and click to remove the sphere, and Control click on the texture to remove the texture. And what I want to do now is I want to pick an airbrush, and I'm gonna pick random colors. Okay, absolutely random colors, and I'm just going to push colors like that on this ground. And then I'm going to go with overlay, and this is going to, like, I'm going to lower down a little bit the impact of that, but you can see this is going to add some visual interest in my color. Okay, it's not anymore basic color. I mean, it's not a basic ground anymore. So next thing I can do is exactly the same thing, but for the sphere actually. So let's add some colors on top of that, like random colors. I try to avoid the colors you don't like, but in this case it's like so subtle that it's gonna be alright. So something like that, and I go with overlay mode. So you can see that the more I add to this, the more variation I have in my light, the more interesting it can be. Okay. So this is just a simple trick to actually add lights to your painting. And the last thing you can do if you feel adventurous is you can merge your group. So now you have only one layer, and with a layer on top, using a texture brush, you can actually reblend some stuff and make this painterly feel, but by blending different shapes together, like if they were made as one big thing, like blurring the shapes together. Like as you can see, I'm picking some shapes and blurring them and like making them like if I were painting on a real canvas actually. And this helps. So with time, it takes a lot of time, this technique, but this helps create like a, how can I say, the illusion that you use traditional media. Okay, you can even go with like brush strokes that goes in some weird directions. For instance, if I want to remove the harsh angle over there, I can totally like pick a texture brush and paint, something like that, and I can like that push my paint on top. Can't even go like a bit crazy like this, adding like basically adding texture on top of that. Sometimes merging shapes is also a good idea because we are simplifying the things for the viewer. So here I'm merging the shadow with the actual sphere, and you can see how we still understand what's happening there. So just to compare the quick work I've done with those ones, you can see it's basically adding a bit of chaos on top of your work, giving the impression of like a texturally painted image. So these are the basics. Of course, one thing that's quite nice is if you want to change something, because it's digital, you can still select the object, pick the color layer, and say, okay, I want it to be blue now, or I want it to change, totally change the color, or let's say I want to, like for instance, add a filter over there, filter layer with that will actually change the full color of my object. Okay, I can do that. I can also add a filter that is called gradient map, and gradient map is very cool actually. Let me duplicate this layer and merge it by pressing Ctrl E. So now I have only one layer, and I'm going to push it over there. And gradient map, what they do, let's add it like as a filter, as a destructive filter. If we go there in gradient map, you can see that they will basically map the values, the dark values to this color, and the bright values to this color. So if I pick a gradient, so let's choose a preset. So this one, for instance, you can see how like the dark values of my image are mapped to black, blue, towards orange. Okay, so if now I decide to change the value, you can see how I can remap my values to this map. So let's pick a black and white. I don't have a black and white, but let's pick a gradient with two colors. Let's pick a white there, and let's pick a dark over there. Okay, it's quite strange color, sorry, I was in foreground, sorry. And as you can see, this acts like a layer filter, so I can push the dark even darker, and I can push the white even brighter in order to create an exposure image, a more exposed image. So the cool thing with that is that it works with colors, so I can add like different colors and create like different scenes, different moods. So let's say that I'm going for a more cooler scene. I can go and play with the different intensity of the values, but make sure, yeah, that you're following a pattern that actually makes sense to the values that you're picking. Something like that, and this should be like very bright, maybe orange, something like that. So this is called gradient map, and this is actually quite useful sometimes to start a painting, okay, because you can add colors pretty quickly. And last thing that you should be aware of is like I'm using a lot Control U in order to tweak the colors and to try different schemes of colors. So this is something that's really useful when exploring different types of colors. I really would advise you to play along with that. So this was actually a long part, a long introduction part for drawing and digital and like painting actually. Now we are going to enter the demo mode, and I'm going to comment on top of the time lapse to share with you like a few tips and tricks on top of what I've already shown to you. So see you right now in the time lapse actually. So let's get started. So in this portrait study, what I've done is actually I've taken a reference on Pinterest with a good lighting situation, and I started, as you can see, by drawing out the main areas of the skull, the jaw. I started to place the ear. As you can see, the ear I've like put in some marks that are like diagonally targeting the top of the eyebrow and the bottom of the nose. And I'm also like drawing a small mask around the eyes in order to get the different shapes that are on this location. And as you can see, basically for now it's just a drawing task, like where I decide to put different features, draw like basic features such as the mouth, the nose, etc. And you can see that I have a lot of construction lines defining the actual, like not every, but some planes of the head. So I really encourage you to look online about the planes of the head. Basically they represent the different angles that we have in the volumes for our head. So basically the cheek area, the zygomatic arch, the different planes for the mouth, for instance, or the nose, the eyes. And there are many like good models, for instance, on the website Sketchfab. If you type planes of the head, you can have like a 3D model where you can look around, and it's very interesting to learn about those shapes or those planes, because when you have different lighting situation, light will bounce like on different size, like on not size but on different like ways according to the planes. So make sure you do a study of for instance what is called the Asaro head from the sculptor John Asaro, that has done actually a pretty well-known model for the head, for the planes of the head. And yes, there is actually like a few books also talking about that. So for instance, I'm like in terms of books, there is like one called anatomy for sculptors that is pretty cool. Actually talking about the different planes of the head, plus you have tons of other things regarding anatomy. So you can see that right now I'm actually like I've put a layer just below the drawing, like full gray, in order to add paint. And like the first thing to do when you're painting a portrait is like just put a lot of paint, and like it's a very iterative process. You just have to put paint and like blend basically. So you will see that I'm mostly working on only one layer actually. So in this situation I've merged the line art with the paint that was below on another layer. And basically layers in this kind of study, I'm quick study I would say, because it's only like I think it's a 2-hour process, but like of course if I'm making like a very long drawing, I mean like more than 10 hours or something like that, I will use different layers and like be much more organized. But you can see that on my layers, except for the layers that were used to create the canvas that is behind with the paper texture, my painting actually is only one layer, and sometimes I use, as I was saying, like some layers on top just to put like to make different tests and to try out some things actually in order to have like a safety net for my drawing. So as you can see, I'm like trying to find the different values for this portrait painting. It's easier because like of course I have a reference, but as a good exercise I'm not placing the reference directly on the canvas. As you can see, I'm like having it on a second monitor, forcing me to analyze the shape and come back on my Cintiq and actually like implementing the things that I've seen in the reference. And also, just so you know, I'm not following the reference like 100%. Like it's always like, for me, like I don't want to be a Xerox. I don't want to basically copy pixel per pixel. Otherwise, like I don't think it makes sense. So it's always like a way to like doing painting and study is always a way also to interpret, to get your own touch in the portrait or in what you're studying. And that's, I think, like a good way also to enjoy the process of learning. So as you can see, I was struggling a little bit with the hairs, and the hairs are like not from the reference actually, they are like made up hairs. And as you can see, like I was struggling like finding the actual values for the hairs. It's quite hard to do hairs because you have to think about big chunk of hairs, but the highlights for the hairs are like picking some reflection from the light, and they're like less important in terms of size and value and shape. So it takes a lot of time, like, and lots of iteration, as you saw, and it's not finished. So, and like one thing that I'm doing to help me like concentrate on the task is to jump around on different locations. So I spend maybe 10 minutes on like or even less, like 2 or 3 minutes on one side, and then I jump and I go elsewhere. Like this helps me in order to keep the focus on the whole piece, as you can see. So because I've started the painting process, like you can see that my canvas is jumping a lot and I'm zooming a lot. It's because like I don't need anymore, I will say, the global picture, because I'm not working with proportion anymore, even though, as you can see, sometimes from time to time I'm using Liquify to test out some things. But basically I consider that like here, like it's been already a long time that I've like settled down on the main huge proportions. I still allow myself to move like the proportions with Liquify by something like 20% from the original sketch, but that's just to try out something in like a test. You can see also that here I've been working on this side of the head a lot, because actually the cheek on a face like this reflects usually a lot of light and is quite smooth. So even though I was using only thinking about using only one brush, which is a really cool brush, a texture brush, but again, whatever the brush I'm using. But for blending, at some point I decided to use the airbrush because it's a bit easier to get like the gradient, and then on top of the gradient I used my texture brush in order to bring back this texture information that I have from my other brush. So here you can see that I've added like some hairs like in another layer just underneath, in order to like try some stuff, and like right away after I'm going to merge this layer with the rest of my piece. So adding some lighting information, some reflective light, as you can see on the chin area, and also like make sure again, and that's probably the best advice I can give you, make sure to watch take a look at the planes of the head. This brings a lot of clear informations for you to understand why I'm picking this kind of value and why there is a hole there represented by a darker value, etc., etc. So I've also on top using a layer, I've placed with a fancy brush with like different dots inside, I've added another layer of texture on top if you want, and with dark colors and lighter colors, and I've used a multiply layer not a multiplier, I've just turned down the opacity actually, and I've blended everything together. I've also used a filter that I really like to use called the min removal filter, and what I've done with this one is actually I've duplicated my portrait, put it on top, applied the min removal filter, and then I've toned down the opacity and merged it with the original paint. This brings another level of texture, procedural texture I would say, which is quite neat. Usually when I'm painting portrait, I'm also liking to add a bit of a background, an abstract background. So that's why I've done with like the different lines that I've copied around. So yes, basically that's the process of this portrait, and as you can see, it's hard to never say stop, but here I had to say stop at this point. Okay, so as a bonus section, I wanted to share with you how you can animate using Krita. So I've set up the animation workspace just by clicking over there and clicking on animation. And as you can see, by default, you have a layer you can draw on. So I'm going to do a very simple animation demo with like a bouncing ball, usually it's the basic stuff. And as you can see, I've every layer that I'm selecting are linked with the layers here in the timeline, so they are actually the same, and you can enable them with visibility, etc. And here are your frames for animating. So here what I'm going to do is, like for instance, frame 3, I'm going to right click and create a blank frame, and I'm also going to enable here onion skinning. Okay, so the cool thing with onion skinning is that you have a lot of control with it. You can go with, for instance, here and go onion skin, and you will have this small window showing you like the tint amount of the frames. So you can see that this represents the color of the frames that are going to be shown previously before the key you are in, and this is for the next frame, and this represents basically like frames that are like before and after. And if you look at this like strange diagram here, what is the 0 here button is your current frame. Okay, so this is the frame you are on, and this is the frame 1 before, this is 2 frame before, this is 1 frame after, and this is 2 frame after. Okay, and those levels are levels of opacity. So you can see how I can like reduce the amount of opacity of the different frames that I have over there. Okay, so in this frame what I'm going to do is I'm going to land my ball on the ground flat like this, because this is like the one keyframe, one important keyframe. And I can also move the frame like this, like just simply dragging and dropping it. And I can scrub the timeline going up, and you can see I already had like this motion. So now I'm going to go in frame 3. If I draw over there, you will see that I will basically like duplicate the frame and draw on top. Okay, this is not what I want obviously, so what I'm going to do is right click, and here I'm going to create a blank frame. And what I want to do in this context is having like my intermediate stretch here ball. And as you can see, I'm starting to have this motion. So here I can also like basically like right click over there and insert my new frame. You can, by the way, of course, use a shortcut for that. And the shortcuts you have to set up them, I think. But in this context here, I'm going to do that, stretching a bit the volume, something like that, just for the in-between. And here, let's say I'm going to add another key, create a blank key, something like that. I can even transform it, making it like taller a bit. And you can also duplicate key, and this is cool. So I can select the first one and press Ctrl, and I can move this new key around. And as you can see, like that, I've moved my key, and I've moved it on the wrong layer. So let me undo, and this will be fine. So I can also say here the last frame of my animation will be a frame actually frame 1 before, so 11. And I can say also that the frame rate that I'm going to work with is going to be 8 frames per second in this case. And I can play, and you can see that I have already started to have an animation. So here I'm gonna like send back my my circle to the top. So right click, create a blank frame, something like that. And here, actually, what I can do is duplicate this frame again, and I'm going to move the ball a little bit and let it hang a bit in the air, something like that. Okay, and you know what? Let's stretch even more this one and squash it a bit more, just to create a very snappy motion. And one thing that I can do is just after this frame over there, like I've lost the onion skinning, sometimes you're losing it, it's okay. I can like make the small particles that I've added on the ground like continue further. So you will see like now I have this bouncing ball, and what I can do is I can like press shift to select multiple keys. I can move them around also. So I will bring them back in this case, and you will see like how it can work. So starting from frame 0, okay, I need to deselect the key. Okay, and now it works. So let's say that now I'm stopping at frame 10. Okay, actually I can totally delete the last one because it's the same as the first one in the cycle. But let's crank up the speed to 12, for instance, and you can see how you have your animation. So what I can do is I can retime again by selecting multiple frames. For instance, like make this a bit forward. And I can try, like sometimes I don't understand like why it's like going back and forth, but I think it's because I have the frame selected. But you can test your timing like this. And of course you have multiple layers, so I can add one, for instance, over there. And this is going to be like, for instance, the eyes of our character. Also, let's do something like this. So this frame, now I create a new blank frame over there. I enable onion skinning. Let's say this character is going to rotate. So I'm gonna put one eye over there like this. For this frame, I'm going to create a new one. I don't need to actually have something over there. This frame is the same. Maybe we see a little bit the eye over there. And over there, what I can do, just so it's funny, I can like bring big eye like this being squashed. On this one, I'm gonna bring them back. And on the latest one, I think I'm gonna bring them like this with the mouth over there. So I have an issue in terms of positioning of the eyes. So I'm gonna remove this one, and hence the cool aspect of layers. You can see how I can change my way around like this. And here I can like duplicate by pressing Ctrl and dragging the key, the last key. And you can see how I can quickly add a new layer on top. So, and just to be more, just so it's more interesting, I'm gonna add like small eyes that are cross-eyed. So we don't see it there. Here it's starting to come back. We see it a bit there, and here it's there. Doing, doing. And you can see how over there I can like quickly animate stuff. So the cool thing is that you have all the brushes, all the tools that we've already seen, like Liquify, like gradients, etc., etc. So you can like get pretty solid in terms of like in terms of what you can do in Krita, in terms of animation. You can also import sound. So if you want to import sound, you click this button over there, and you click Open Audio. I don't have one over there, so just know that you can. And you can also have shortcuts over there in order to add some layers. And in the settings and for the dockers over there, you have animation curves. And animation curves actually like gives you a way to, if I can here, give you a way to add some keyframes in your animation. So just one. So I've undocked the the curves. I wasn't able to do that. I'm sorry. But what you can actually do is over there in the plus, you can say it's not on the plus anymore. Sorry, this has changed. It's over there. Yes, as you can see, you can say add opacity keyframe, and here what I've done is actually added like an opacity keyframe, and I can like add another one, and for now there is only opacity, but I think this is going to change later on in Krita actually. And the strange thing is that like here I'm not seeing my curves, like usually over there I can see, oh yes, I need to refresh maybe the window. And here what I can do is actually change the opacity for my curve, and you will see that it's actually affecting the layer for the opacity. But for now we can only work with opacity. So I will say that I think twinning is coming, like for moving the actual layers, which will be a big game changer because it will twinning, because it will let people create compositions with for instance background and stuff like this. So yes, it will be a huge game changer, I think. So I don't know how and why I cannot remove the opacity keyframe. is quite weird. Okay, it's just because I need to push back probably the animation, right? Let me duplicate my frame. I think there's still a bug over there. Anyway, so yes, it will come later on. I've seen some posts about that, so don't worry. It's going to be like, I hope one day available. The fact to twin transformations, but for now, at least in the version that I'm working with, we don't have this. So you will have to export this in another software. But to be honest with you, I'm rarely using Krita for animation because Blender, the tools in Blender are much better. Which, by the way, I've done a full tutorial about that, which is called the Grayscale on this channel. So feel free to go and watch it if you're interested. But it's always nice to have like a software like Krita with those kind of tools, so I won't complain, of course. So this is the end of this very long tutorial, actually. I hope you liked it. I hope you've learned some stuff. Again, I couldn't say more the fact that it's always a learning adventure. Like, I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to improve and to learn from the best around me, and the best that we see on the internet, and like watching tutorials and like trying to improve my anatomy, trying to improve my drawing skills, my observation skills, trying to understand better the things that I'm watching, like in terms of their structure, how to construct objects, how to learn better painting techniques and things like that. So I'm never gonna personally stop to learn, otherwise I would probably be dead. but I hope it was useful for you, this whole tutorial. Don't hesitate to comment below, don't hesitate to post questions, don't hesitate to be part of the Krita community on the forums. This is like quite a nice community. Yes, basically that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you later.